orthopedic surgeon and sports medicine physician, and today I am reviewing cricket injuries. Yes, I did say cricket. That's what I'm reacting to and reviewing today. I have parents that come from Jamaica, and I also have siblings that come from Jamaica.
Fajita, awada.
So I have an awareness of the game of cricket. I never played the game of cricket, and I don't really know the rules of the game of cricket, but I am aware of the game of cricket. It's not so much here in North America, although people do play it in small groups, but it is very popular around the world. And right now is the Cricket World Cup, the 2019 Cricket World Cup. Now I have to say that when people said look at cricket videos, there are lots of cricket injuries, and I was like, how are you gonna get hurt playing this game? It looks like they played in dress pants, vests. Like, this is a sophisticated game. So I had to check it out myself. And when I did, there was a few things that I learned. First of all, the cricket ball is quite hard. It has a core that's made of cork and an outer shell which is made of leather. And the fastest pitch ever recorded in history, or I guess they don't say pitch, they say bowl. The fastest bowl in history was 161 kilometers per hour. For all of you Americans, that's like 100 miles per hour, which is pretty freaking fast. So not only did I learn that the ball is hard and it is coming at a very high speed, I also learned that there have been some fatalities over the years. So let's get to watching the videos and let's see what we can learn together. So for this first scene, as a batsman and the fielder are both running towards the ball, they collide with one another and they smash heads together once they both meet at the ball. This clip isn't very long and we don't get to see much of the aftermath, but we can see that the fielder has struck the batsman in the mouth with the back of his head. And we see afterwards here the batsman walking off with blood pouring from his mouth. At the very least, we know that he suffered some kind of laceration in or around his mouth. He may have also suffered a dental injury, perhaps knocking out a tooth or chipping a tooth. I don't think that he's suffered a jaw fracture because he looks to be moving his mouth relatively well, but that's also a possibility as well. So already we've learned that although this is not a contact sport, collisions are possible and people can get hurt. So let's go on to the next one. As I said in the introduction, the fastest ball that has been recorded in cricket has been 161 kilometers an hour. And in this clip, we see a batsman who has taken a shot to the head after the ball has bounced off of the playing surface. And although it's difficult to say exactly what kind of force he's been struck with, we can see that the force of this ball was enough to smash his helmet and knock his helmet free of his head. We really don't get to see much of the aftermath, but I would assume by the severity of this impact that this batsman has suffered at the very least a minor head injury or a minor concussion. This next clip is in keeping with the theme of batsmen being struck in the head with the ball. And we can see here that although the batsman has swung at the ball, he misses the ball, which then strikes him in the helmet. And right away we can see that the batsman recoils in pain as the ball strikes him in the helmet. We can see that they're taking him off the field and he has a laceration on the right hand side of his face at the level of his eye. We can also see that they're giving him some assistance as he walks off the field because he seems to be in a semi-dazed state. Now in this area of the head there are a number of injuries that are possible. It is possible to damage any one of the structures that is around the eye. And this includes bones such as the orbital or the maxilla, as well as the eye itself and the structures of the eye. In this particular case, he looks to be bleeding from around the eye, but because of the impact of the ball, he may have also suffered a fracture of one of the facial bones. And in fact, there has been more than one professional cricketer that has had to retire from his competitive career as a result of injuries to their eye. We've learned that the helmets do not offer 100% protection from impacts. So in this next clip, we get another view of a batsman who gets struck in the head with the ball. And in this case, we can see that the ball hits him directly in the opening above the mask on his helmet. And we can see that after he's taken off his helmet, he has suffered a laceration on the bridge of his nose that is bleeding profusely. It is quite possible that with this type of impact, he may have suffered a nasal fracture. If he had suffered a nasal fracture, this would most likely be an injury that would require a closed reduction in a hospital setting. At the very least, he's going to require some stitches to close the laceration on the bridge of his nose. Okay, so let's move on. So in this next clip, I wasn't initially able to tell exactly what had occurred, and I thought that this was just another example of a batsman being struck in the head. If you watch the slow motion close-up replay of this incident, you see that before the ball struck him in the head, it actually first struck him on the forearm at the level of his wrist. Afterwards, we can see him grasping his forearm and grimacing in pain. We notice that he is looking at a large welt or contusion that is appearing on the side of his forearm. I don't see a deformity of his forearm that originates from the area of this contusion or this welt, but it is conceivable to imagine that after being struck in the forearm by a projectile moving at a speed of 150 to 160 kilometers per hour, that it is quite possible for him to have suffered a fracture of the ulna in this area. Were the ulna to be fractured, it would most likely to be a direct transverse fracture of the ulna in this area. And this is quite similar to a nightstick fracture, which we've discussed in videos before. That's basically a direct transverse fracture to the mid-shaft of the ulna as a result of a person trying to ward off a blow with a bat or a nightstick. This injury would require an open reduction and internal fixation with plates and screws. Now in the modern game of cricket, we can see that the batsmen wear helmets to protect themselves from the projectile that is approaching at a high rate of speed. However, given the velocities that are involved with this game, you have to wonder, why don't the bowlers also wear helmets? And this video clip gives us a demonstration of exactly why that might be necessary. So here we can see that the bowler bowls the pitch towards the batsman, who hits it squarely. The only problem being is that he hits it squarely back at the bowler, and the bowler takes this ball directly off the chin. Now obviously, getting hit in the head with a fast-moving projectile is never a good thing. But if you're gonna get hit in the head, it's probably better that you get hit in the jaw rather than being hit in the temple or in the upper skull. The further away that the impact is from the computer means the larger the distance over which the force can be dissipated before it actually does come to the computer. We really do get an appreciation for the force of the impact at the time that he is struck. We can see that immediately as the ball strikes him in the side of the jaw, 3 teeth, or pieces of teeth, fly out of his mouth onto the ground. So it makes me think that perhaps bowlers should also wear helmets. If he also suffered a jaw fracture here, then depending on the severity of this injury, he may require either an open reduction and internal fixation with plates, or he may be able to be treated with wiring of the jaw alone. Okay, so for this next one here, we can see that this batsman is quite lucky. This is another head injury, but the ball appears to have been stuck in the grill of his mask. So he gets away with suffering only a small laceration over his left eye. But I'm beginning to see a theme here, and that is that head and facial injuries are quite common in the game of cricket. For this next clip, we actually get away from injuries to the batsman or the bowler. And we can see here that the batsman hits the pitch from the bowler quite squarely, sending it far off into the outfield. There are 2 fielders that are both running to catch the ball, and I guess here neither one of them called the ball. And so they're both running to the ball and concentrating on the ball, but not concentrating on each other. And you guessed it, they collide with one another. And we can see on the slow-mo clip that one of the fielders gets it worse than the other, because the one fielder strikes the other fielder in his head with his shoulder. The one who gets hit in the head appears to be knocked unconscious. Now, if this fielder who is laying motionless has suffered a loss of consciousness, then it is safe to say that he will have suffered a concussion from this collision. Now, I've talked about concussions before in other videos, but for those of you who haven't seen those, I'll give you a recap here. And a concussion is a type of brain injury that occurs after an impact to the skull. Basically what happens is this. The brain is suspended in fluid inside the skull. Because the brain is suspended in fluid, it doesn't move immediately. What happens is that the skull, which is moving, travels towards the brain, initially banging into the side of the brain, and then causing that brain to recoil off the skull, travel through the fluid to then bang on the other side of the skull. You suffer what's called a coup injury on the side of impact, and then a contra coup injury on the opposite side of the impact. So although you've only been struck in the head once, your brain has actually suffered 2 impacts on the inside. Yeah, it's kind of like a head injury twofer. Most people don't really want that though.
Okay.
If this athlete has suffered a concussion as we suspect, then he will have to undergo a concussion rehabilitation protocol to make sure that he is free from all of the possible side effects of the concussion and that his cognitive function has been restored to normal so that he can get back to doing his normal day-to-day activities, including playing sports. So in the clip so far, we've seen Batsman being struck in the side of the helmet, the front of the helmet, and the front of the helmet with the ball becoming lodged in the grill. In this instance, we see a batsman who manages to get struck with the ball directly in the opening of his mask. I mean, the ball doesn't stop at the opening. It goes directly inside the opening and smashes him in the skull. After watching these, I wondered to myself, why don't they just make the opening smaller than the size of the ball? We can see that his eye appears to be red around the socket, but we don't see any lacerations, and it looks as if he manages to keep his eye open. So I suspect that there hasn't been an injury to the corneal surface or the sclera of the eye, the covering of the eyeball. Most likely he'll end up with a shiner or a bruise around the eye socket for the next several days. So we can see that cricket batsmen wear several pieces of protective clothing, which includes the helmets, their gloves, and the pads on the front of their legs. We can see that any bony prominence is a potential site of impact for the ball. And in this particular case, the batsman is struck directly on the end of his elbow by the bouncing cricket ball. And although I can't tell you exactly what injury he suffered from this, I can tell you that it didn't feel good, because we can see that he immediately doubles over in pain. It is quite possible that he has suffered a fracture of the olecranon, which is the major bone of the elbow, from this impact. This is an injury that would require an open reduction and internal fixation, with either a tension band and K-wire construct or a pre-contoured plate with screw fixation. So in this last clip, we can see that the batsman notices the ball is coming directly for him, and he tries to duck out of the way of the approaching ball. However, he is unable to move quickly enough, and the ball strikes him directly in the side of the helmet at the level of the temple. And it is interesting to note that if a person is struck hard enough in the temple, that the bone in this area may fracture and injure an artery directly underneath. And this may cause bleeding, which may result in a subdural hematoma, which can cause prolonged loss of consciousness or even death. And as I mentioned in the introduction, there have been at least 2 professional cricketers that have died as a result of being struck in the head by the ball. So today I've been reacting to cricket injuries, and I hope we've learned that cricket is a way more dangerous sport than I would ever have imagined. They could make the opening in the mask smaller. They could do that. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you don't miss when we post new content. If you're a returning member of the intern army, you know what to do. Smack the like button and share this with a friend. And as always, that's been a word from Dr. Chris, not your everyday ortho.
I got a question.